Mathieu. D'autres? Guillaume. Oh, merci.
C'est ce que je fais de
Hello.
Bonjour. Hello. Je m'appelle Renaud.
I'm Justin.
Et je m'appelle Aneta.
And we're all students from McGill University in urban plan. So hello everyone. Today Justin, Aneta, and I are proud to present our concept for Griffintown, which is called l'Allée William, or the William Aisle. So in walking around Griffintown and experiencing the neighborhood, we noticed that an important issue or challenge is that the built environment of Griffintown does not really support or sustain the materialization of social life in the neighborhood. As some examples you can see, here on the upper left corner we have La Rue des Seigneurs, which crosses the bike path in the canal, which a lot of people, pedestrians and bicyclists use. And pedestrians are encouraged to go across the street to continue instead of taking the underground tunnel, but the street does not have any measures to slow down cars, a stop sign, or any crosswalks. You have a lot of empty lots like this, which have puddles of water or gravel that don't look really attractive. The streets, this is William Street on both sides, we can see looks really bleak, depressing, vacant, a bit abandoned. And we have a lot of these courtyards that are created by the condo towers around the neighborhood that are very typical in a way of Griffintown, that also lack a lot of sunlight during the day. They often seem underused because they don't really sustain the kind of interactions that residents are looking for. On the other hand, you have a very attractive attraction, a very central attraction that is the canal, that is used by a lot of Montrealers, a lot of residents of Griffintown, which is really the focal point of social interaction in the neighborhood. But it's a bit paradoxical because it is on the edge of the neighborhood. So what we're looking to do is to create a more central focal point of the neighborhood, an attraction, a social hub in a way, which is centered around William Street and the intersection of Ottawa, William, and Key Street, which is our intervention zone. So our whole concept was following the vision of the PPU, which highlighted three key terms, which was to create un milieu de vie habité, durable, et plus densément occupé. And in those terms, we understand them as first, habité, we understand it as a neighborhood that is inhabited not only in terms of housing, but especially in terms of public and social life, that is beyond the confines of the home, that people take ownership over the space that is outside of their apartment. Griffintown is a neighborhood that is really turned onto itself, into the apartments. So we're trying to take this social life that is happening inside of the apartments onto the street. In terms of durable, we understand that as sustainable through all facets of urban living, so that includes commercial and economic vitality, as well as accessibility and affordability of goods such as groceries and food. There are currently only 2 supermarkets in Griffintown that are located in the eastern part of the neighborhood and are somewhat expensive. And lastly, more densified. We understand that as a neighborhood that is densified, obviously, in terms of housing, but most importantly, that is occupied equally through all different types of amenities and services.
So the PPU principles that we are using in our proposal are 2. First, we are looking to at the principle of quartier mixte et multifonctionnel. So we intend to use this principle by increasing the types of uses along William Street, by adding commercial and social spaces. And we also intend to articulate the masses and define them a little bit more to create a more pleasant human experience along William Street and increase the permeability and improve the built environment through public spaces. And the second principle is aménagement et animation du domaine public. And we really focus on the street in this case, focusing on the streets as a public space. And we intend to look at William Street beyond the ligne directive guide and create a living street. So the actions that we are taking through our proposal is to raise the Guy, Ottawa, and William Street intersection to an at-grade crossing to create a safer pedestrian experience and to slow down traffic. We will be turning Rue William into a one-way Rue Habité. We will enliven the facades and break up the long facades along William Street and implement multiple interventions throughout the street that foster interactions and improve the overall sensory experiences of the street.
Thank you. So we decided to zoom in a bit on the intersection of William, Guy, and Ottawa. So that's looking good right there. So as Nada said, we are planning to raise that intersection. Throughout our many walks, we noticed a lot of cars were speeding or doing U-turns. So we thought that would be a nice safety improvement for that intersection. We also included extending the sidewalk in that intersection, just to make it a little tougher for cars to speed and do U-turns. As Nada said, we are going to make William Street one-way going west. It's a two-way connection, which includes bike lanes as well. Also, as Nada said, we want to lighten up the facade along both of these over here. If you can see in this cutout right there, it's like little garages. We noted 10 of them that are just not being used currently, so we decided to activating them was the best choice. And that could be anywhere from cafe to a farmer's market or a fruit stand, something local, maybe even like a depth or something fairly large. Thanks. And overall, we just want to improve the sensory experience. So along that wall, we do want to include local artists, murals, and above it, just a brief timeline or overall timeline of what we're cool. And in the middle here, you can see we did a cut through to connect the park to the waterfront, which goes straight down. So here are some precedents that exist already throughout the world. So you can see on the upper left, Sydney, Australia has an open, it's like an adaptive reuse space that they use for open market. With the string lights, it's pretty active and fun, and the community comes together and really enjoys it. More locally, we have Capacito, which is located in Montreal, a couple of miles east, in Old Port, around Old Port. So they essentially use a garage, and it's fully activated. So people use it. And during the winter, it closes. It's like a glass closing, so you use it year-round, get to see outside, you're not just like locked in. In Prague, they activated the roofs. You can see they have a garden and public space. It's also what we plan to do for those old heritage buildings. And on the bottom left in Portland, always Portland, but they have a nice raised crosswalk all throughout the city, just for our safety measures. And here are some renderings that are created. So over here you can see the activated garage with the mural all throughout. So you can imagine this throughout the entire stretch of William, with the timeline right above it. And over here is the intersection of Ottawa, Guy, and William. The activated crossing with kids playing and bikes and all that. Any questions?
Should we start? Ok. Est-ce que c'est mieux si je parle en français pour cette présentation ou en anglais?
Si possible, en français. En fait, je pense que c'est mieux en anglais pour eux.
Ok.
Et nous, on va réinterpréter en français.
En français pour la traduction.
Il n'y a pas besoin de faire moi la traduction. Ok, c'est bon. Thank you very much. I have a question about densification. So you mentioned it as among the principles the city is following to continue transforming Griffintown, and you propose not to densify. You propose not to densify, but you mention it within your presentation, and you say densification is about increasing uses, not necessarily increasing housing. Okay. So how do you convince the city to go for that?
Well, we were focusing at the street level of what a person experiences, but we feel that this could be incorporated into a denser proposal as well, perhaps with like stepping back the building a little bit, but just we really do feel that there is a need to articulate like at the street level more carefully than what's been done in Griffintown at the moment.
I might add, we propose a very specific physical intervention, but it also serves more as sort of guidelines that we would like the city to follow in terms of how the future of Griffintown will look like in terms of introducing more commercial activity, very at ground level, and improving the pedestrian experience at the human scale, because Griffintown is a really high-rising neighborhood, and you really feel everything towering on top of you, and there's nothing really to sort of counteract that experience for the pedestrians in the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Okay, yet again, go back, please, to your map of interventions focus.
This one.
Earlier. There. Okay. Okay. So, I mean, it's interesting. You're saying here's this other corridor that should exist somewhere in the middle, something that some of the other groups also picked up. You have commercial streets that are already existing. You have a strong access for recreation along the canal, which is the middle of something. It may be the edge of this neighborhood, but it's definitely the middle of two neighborhoods, and the idea of treating it only as an edge when it's a center as well. So part of my question is, do you have how do you justify making yet another center and corridor? I mean, how does that respond to people's needs? So that's my first question. The second question is about tools and mechanisms. So how do you get old, empty buildings to be filled with cafes and other things through a plan, through a concept? So 2 questions, and you only have a minute and a half. So pick which one of those you want to answer.
So I guess to answer the first one, people's needs. I mean, so if walking around a neighborhood, really didn't find any, stores. I wanted a Red Bull at one point. I had to walk probably 2 miles all the way up to Notre Dame to get that, and I had to pass 2 abandoned depths. So opening up those garages to a dep or a fruit stand to even get an apple for energy would be beneficial. Because the 2 other markets I think are out here, which is a pretty fair walk. Yeah. And then the second question
is how does a plan do that? Because you're saying here are these abandoned shops and everything else. What goes in a plan to make that happen?
That's a good question.
Okay, so it's a vision.
Yeah. Well, as part of this exercise, we focus more on generating ideas and putting them out there for policymakers to look at and to, maybe themselves figure out how this can be implemented. Obviously, at our level, our knowledge of, plan making and policies is limited, but I think there's definitely pathways in which this could be achieved, and I think it just requires a certain political will to ensure that this can happen.
Thank you. Can we go back to the slide with the concept itself? Maybe the one after, sorry, the one where we see, that one. So I was sort of wondering, how do you imagine this street to work on a daily basis, for instance, starting from the raised crosswalks and in terms of the traffic, for instance. How do you see this creating a meeting point in the neighborhood?
So in the PPU, they highlighted a few typologies for streets that they want to implement. The one that was chosen for William was a hybrid street, which would have larger sidewalks, a dedicated bike lane, and a single vehicular lane. top that and make it what they call it a rue habitée, which is essentially an all-at-grade street where cars are at the same level of pedestrian and forces them to slow down with all the interactions that are happening around. There's also not a lot of traffic on William inherently, which also contributes to helping fostering a lot of pedestrian and social activity in that space. And ideally, we don't know if this can be strictly pedestrianized, but we hope that generating a lot of pedestrian and social activity, commercial activity on that stretch would help reduce traffic at a very minimum level.
And that like green triangle in the center would be some sort of public space. Right next to the raised crosswalk.
Oh, that's, yeah. So currently the sidewalk pretty much ends like right there. We decided to extend it just to make a little calming efforts for the cars that are passing by. We were thinking of putting, I think in the rendering, there's like a couple of bike racks there, so people feel like, since it is an intersection of different modes of traffic or vehicular access, I think a bike access there also provides a barrier for people who are handicapped. It also provides like a barrier, even though it's just bikes, it provides like a mental barrier for cars that may be going this way, people feel more comfortable.
Yeah, and it is kind of a key intersection because Guy is Guy crosses Notre Dame and beyond the train tracks, so it can bring in people from beyond Griffintown down to Canal, like through the park. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Last team? Team number 2? Yep.
No,
Thinking 20, it's hard.
Yeah, no, I have to cut off, I can't even pick the put it there.
non, c'est correct. Je pense que
Hi, so I'm Adrian.
And I'm Ariel.
We're both architecture students at McGill. And so this is our proposal for the densification of Griffintown. So the way we started is we started by doing a site analysis to identify the issues with the neighborhood. And what we noticed, first of all, are like, even though there's like quite a lot of green spaces that are currently already here or that are in development, they're quite sparse, and the accessibility to these green spaces is very hard, especially for pedestrians and cyclists. And so, for example, here we noticed that the green spaces on this area of Griffintown were quite successful in linking the industrial past of Griffintown through the Lachine Canal to downtown Montreal. But in the areas where it was actually more dense, these sort of green spaces and gathering spaces and the links between them were harder to find.
So basically moving on, separating by the road touch, you can see that the not really developed area, even though we are building with the one that are shown, that's the future project, they still have the access to the built green area, and